The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Vishen Lakhiani, the entrepreneur, best-selling author, and motivational speaker. You are the founder and CEO of Mind Valley, a personal growth education platform with more than 20 million students in 195 countries. Your first book, The Code of the Extraordinary Mind, has been translated into 25 languages and reached the #1 spot on Amazon, while your second book, The Buddha and the Badass, topped the charts at the Wall Street Journal. Your mission is to bring Mind Valley into the global consciousness by impacting 1 billion lives across the planet. You believe that by focusing inward, anyone is capable of achieving their goals and manifesting their dreams. Your latest book, The 6-Phase Meditation Method, illustrates how to effectively use meditation in the modern world and unlock your hidden potential. Vishen, welcome back to London Real.
Thank you, Brian. It is such an honor to be here. And before we get started, can I acknowledge you for something?
Please.
So I was on your show 6 years ago, and you brought me in to talk about a project I was then creating called Mind Valley University. It was a conference where parents and their kids get to learn together. So the parents will be in one room, and the children were also in classrooms designed for kids. So kids as young as 3 get to learn with their parents. Now, it was a crazy idea, and you were the first person to acknowledge it and give me press on it. And I really wanted to thank you for that. You brought me here on London Real to talk about that project, a project that many people said was crazy, it wouldn't work, but you believed in it, you honored me, you put me on the show, and I just wanted to thank you for your kindness. I never, ever, ever forgot that favor.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I remember you talking about that. And I've seen you set up these universities in cities around the world like Barcelona, and I saw that you bring it in with the children, and you've always been on the cutting edge when it comes to education. So I appreciate what you're doing as well. And I hope we're going to talk about gratitude as well today because it's so powerful. But I really appreciate it. I remember you coming on the show in the old studio. We had this amazing conversation. I've been to one of your A-Fests since, and it's always incredible watching what you guys are doing at Mind Valley. And,
thank you, Brian.
And so I can't wait to talk about this stuff, and I want to get into the book, but I kind of wanted maybe to start and zoom out a bit because it seems like you have had a connection to mindfulness from an early age. And for a lot of people that don't know that, guys our age, we grew up without the internet.
Right.
We grew up without YouTube. And so trying to get these ideas into your head was not an easy thing to do. Very difficult, in fact, unless you knew an uncle or you were in the library or you happened to be in a certain location. And yet, it seems like you had an early experience that probably shaped the rest of your life and maybe stuff we're going to talk about today.
Right.
So I'm wondering if you could talk about your introduction to the concept of mindfulness, which back then was really foreign.
Absolutely. So what happened was I was 14 years old, and I was a really insecure kid. Now, the reason I was insecure is because I had a really bad case of acne, horrible acne, and I was made fun of in school. Now, the interesting thing about our minds is our minds will manifest what we believe, and we know this about the mind affecting the body. There's a whole concept called the placebo effect, right? Where doctors find that what you believe about your health will be true about your health. Doctors can often cause a healing from giving people a placebo, essentially a fake pill, but the patient's belief in the pill and the doctor causes the healing. So when I was 13 years old, something awful happened. I happened to look in the mirror as I was brushing my teeth, and I noticed a pimple. And I turned to an aunt of mine, because I was a kid, and I'm like, oh, I have my first pimple. And the aunt goes, well, congratulations, you're a teenager. And guess what? You're going to get more and more and more and more of these. And she was right. I believed my aunt because she was an authority. And before I knew it, my face was erupting in pimples. Now, I had acne for a really long time, for almost 5 years. I remember going to dermatologists, getting injections in my skin, and it was horrible, and nothing would solve it. But the worst part was the lunch line in school. And I remember there was this one particular day, I'm standing in the lunch line, and I have this big white boil on my face. And the kid at the back of the line looks at me and goes, "You're disgusting. You're making all of us here not want to eat." And the other kid started laughing at me. And that was brutal. That was horrendous. Now, when I was 14, I was browsing through my dad's bookshelf because I grew up in Malaysia. And in Malaysia back then, there were 3 television channels, maybe 4 or 5 American programs that you could watch on any given day, no internet. So I didn't really have that much to do. And I found this book called The Silva Mind Control Method. So as I flipped through this book, it was written in 1977, was by a Texan mind science pioneer called Jose Silva. And he had found that by getting people to relax and to go into what is called the alpha state of mind, right, which is a slowdown of your brain frequency, you could visualize outcomes and self-hypnotize yourself to change habits or even heal. So I was fascinated by this book. And it took me a while to master the techniques. There were no Silva method classes in Malaysia, so I couldn't enroll in one. So I had to read the book, try, read again, try. Now the book was really an advertisement for his seminar. I couldn't afford to attend the seminar, so I had to kind of decipher his techniques from his books, and eventually I figured it out, right? When I was 17 years old, I had already had a steady meditation practice. And there, I learned a technique from Jose Silva, which is where you sit down, you get into a deep state of meditation, and you visualize your body healing using a specific sequence. I decided to apply that sequence to my skin, and in 5 weeks, meditating 3 times a day for 3 minutes each, I completely healed my skin. I'd had acne for 5 years, chronic acne. I healed it in 5 weeks, around 3 minutes a day, 3 times a day. And I was shocked. So when this happened, I decided to go deeper into what can I do with my mind. The next thing I did was I ended up imagining and visualizing myself representing Malaysia in the US Open Taekwondo Championships because I was a martial artist. And that happened too. Before I knew it, I was in the United States, the Colorado Springs Olympic Training Center, fighting, representing my country in the US Open. That changed the course of my life. I now discovered that I could move towards goals, I could have control over my body, and that set me up for what would later be the launch of my company, Mind Valley.
Wow. I want to just pause there because a lot of people are listening to this and they'll be like, yes, I believe that's true. And a lot of people are saying that can't be true because Western medicine and everything we're taught as kids and even in the mainstream says that you can't do that. You need a medical doctor, you need a pill, you need a this to do that. And yet, we all know the placebo effect is real. And I remember there was a 60 Minutes episode and they were talking about this, and it's like the placebo effect is there and no one ever explains it. They just kind of go, oh yeah, that's true. But like we know that the mind is powerful in all ways. And as a kid, my experience was my mom, I'm from California, so my mom was into some of these things, and I think she did the Firewalk experience with Tony Robbins when I was a kid, and so she was always saying, positive thinking, Brian. But then I was into science and computer programming always said everything is cause and effect. So I grew up in these two minds, Vishen, where I went to school at MIT and got an engineering degree and everything was the science. But as I get older, I realize everything you're saying is true. That the mind is so powerful and it'll bring us what we want. And how do you usually get people to step over and say, maybe that's a possibility?
Well, at this point, it's science. Okay, so I'll share a really interesting study. This was done by a doctor called J.B. Moseley, Moseley. And it was covered in the New York Times sometime around 2012 or 2013. So here's what happened. J.B. Moseley had a theory that the placebo effect was going to be able to help patients not just with, simple ailments like back pain, but with diseases that required surgery. So the disease he started to look at was arthritis of the knee. A lot of men, he found particularly US veterans, people who had served in wars and were now in their 60s and 70s, had a painful knee condition, arthritis of the knee, and it required going for surgery. So J.B. Moseley decided to do an experiment. He took 10 men who were veterans, and all of them were put under anesthesia. Now, 8 of the 10 simply had incisions made on their knee that were then bandaged up, right? So when they came out of anesthesia, it looked like they had had that surgery. 8 out of 10 had a fake sham surgery. 2 out of 10 had the actual surgery. Now, at the end of this experiment, 1 month later, all 10 men, 100% of these men, were cured of arthritis of the knee. So the 8 men who had a sham surgery somehow believed they had had the real surgery, and their pain disappeared. And this shows that the power of our mind is not just for simple aches and pains or for healing skin. It can literally heal aspects of your body that today might require surgery. And this baffled doctors. And so this has led to a lot more research in the placebo effect. And today, almost any medicine that is released anywhere in the Western world has to be tested against a placebo.
Wow. It's mind-boggling that that can actually happen.
Right.
And it's still not really acknowledged by modern medicine.
Well, at this point it is.
Yeah.
It is, almost, because no drug can be released without a test against a placebo.
Right, but your doctor will never recommend this as a procedure. It's usually
It
the
depends
surgery,
on the doctor,
the
right?
pill. Yeah,
it depends on the doctor. Unfortunately, in some healthcare systems, doctors are incentivized to overprescribe drugs. In certain countries, that's just where the economy works. But a good doctor knows that so much of healing has to do with a patient's belief and trust in the doctor, but also in the patient's own capacity to heal.
Yeah. What kind of 14-year-old kid dissects a book that's probably too complicated for a 20-year-old kid and then puts the practice into place for 3 years?
Well,
I mean, what were you like as a kid? Because that's intense.
Yeah, well, I grew up with a slight case of Asperger's, right? So because of that, I had difficulty connecting with people. I remember I had to read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People at least 8 times before my 18th birthday, so I could understand how human beings worked. But I was great at math, I was great at science, I had this brilliant brain. And so I just had a unique brain. I was not neurotypical. But because I didn't have that many friends, I mean, I was made fun of, I lived in a country where I didn't have internet until I was 19, didn't have too many TV stations. All I could do was read the books from my dad's bookshop. My dad never went to school. He never went to college, but he self-educated himself by reading all the great works by people like Bob Proctor, Jose Silva, Wayne Dyer. They became my teachers because I had no other choice. There was very little to do.
Wow, that's fascinating. All right, so there's a lot of your dad in you as
Right.
well. That whole because if you're around a parent that self-educates, then that gets to be in your DNA, right? It's just without even if it's spoken, it's like, oh, well, dad does this, and so I can do this too. So.
Right, I just wanted to be like my dad.
Wow. All right, so fast forward, you end up you go to Michigan, right? In Dearborn, right? Is that
In Ann Arbor.
in Ann Arbor, right?
University
Ann Arbor.
of Michigan,
So I
Ann
spent the
Arbor.
summer in Ann Arbor working for Ford Motor Company, and they stuck us in one of the high-rise dorms
Right.
for that summer. So I got a touch for Michigan. But what an amazing place! And then you go out to Silicon Valley. You're working there for a tech company, and you realize that you're having a stressful time, and you realize maybe this is the time I go back into meditation.
Exactly.
Okay.
So when I was 19, I moved to the US. And now, being a teenager, going to an American university, I got caught up in the culture of university, which was getting drunk for the first time, like cramming for exams, doing other things that we shall not talk about on this show.
Football games?
and I lost my meditation practice.
Right,
I
okay.
stopped. I just stopped.
Yeah.
And it was tough. I almost flunked out of school. My GPA, I'm not proud to say, was 2.54, just barely passing. And after I graduated, I moved to Silicon Valley. I borrowed $30,000 from my father, and I moved to Silicon Valley to attempt to start a small little software company. I had this idea for a certain type of community software. Unfortunately, my timing sucked. The dot-com bubble burst. Thousands of people were laid off. Then September 11 hit, and again, thousands of people were laid off. And the economy was so bad that no one was hiring. So I ended up sending out my resume to any job I could try to find on Craigslist, which was the job hunting site at that time. And finally I got a job, but it was a dialing for dollars job. I had to pick up the phone and call attorneys from A to Z in San Antonio, Texas, and pitch them on the company's software. So it was basically cold calling, interrupting American attorneys in the middle of their day. And I can tell you it was an awful job because Texas attorneys do not like being interrupted by salesmen in the middle of a busy day. And after one particular day when I was told to F off, maybe for the 13th time, I fell into a depression. Now, I was not as deep into meditation then as I was as a 17-year-old, right? But I remember getting online because my life sucked. I was sleeping on a friend's couch, sleeping on a friend's couch. I had very little money in my bank account. And if I didn't close the sale, I didn't get paid. The economy was so bad, there was no base salary. I got on Google, and I can't remember what I typed in, but I was searching for hope. And there I see Silva Ultramine System. It was the updated version of that old course I'd taken years ago. Right? So I fly to LA, I take that seminar. I was the only person who showed up because they were not very good at self-promotion. I was the only person who showed up, so I had a one-on-one with the instructor. And I flew back to San Francisco and started work on Monday. Now immediately I started applying one of the techniques I learned in that seminar. And here I ask for you and your viewers to have an open mind. Okay? It was a technique that had to do with human intuition. So the technique suggested that if we can get into an altered state of mind, now you can get into altered states in 4 ways: breath work, meditation, neurotraining, or plant medicine. But this was true meditation, a very specific meditation protocol that puts you into the alpha level of mind, but then takes you deeper to what is called the theta level of mind, where your brainwave frequency is 4 to 7 cycles per second. A usual brainwave is 14 to 21 cycles per second, so you're lowering your brainwaves quite significantly. And when you're at theta, you know you're there if you're meditating because your head kind of goes like that. Right. You're drifting off asleep, but you can train yourself to be awake there. And when you're awake there, you're almost in this pseudo dream state, and these insights and impulses come to you. So what I would do is, now back then we used the Yellow Pages. I'd have to go to the San Francisco Public Library, check out the Yellow Pages for San Antonio, and then run my finger down. So rather than call names at random, I'd run my finger down, go to the theta level of mind, and just listen within. And every now and then, I'd feel an impulse. And it's hard to describe what that impulse was like. It feels almost like a little burst of joy in your heart, a burst of joy, a burst of hope. And as soon as I feel that, I would call that attorney. And an interesting thing happened. Okay, so as a salesperson, I kept an Excel spreadsheet with everything. You're logging everything: the number of cold calls you make, the number of times you get past the attorney's assistant, the number of times the attorney gets past 10 minutes on the phone, the number of times they ask for a brochure, the number of times you close the sale. Everything is mapped. Now, without any other factors changing, just using that technique, running my finger down, listening to that voice within, I doubled my sales overnight. So I started, I was thrilled. I went to my boss and he said, what are you doing? And I said, I think they call it intuition. And my boss said, nah, that's bullshit. But can you keep doing it? Now I started going deeper and deeper into other aspects of personal growth. Creative visualization, for example, where you visualize yourself hitting your goals. And again, I doubled my sales. Another technique was something called subliminal programming, where you visualize the person you're seeking to communicate with, and you set a simple prayer or intention that whatever is best for everyone concerned will happen. And again, I doubled my sales. In a span of 4 months, I got promoted 3 times, and I went from lowly phone rep to vice president of sales.
Boom, boom. And now you were back on track.
Back on track. All of a sudden, I was earning a decent salary. I remember moving into my own apartment, getting off a frickin' couch. That was a big deal for me. And now the company sent me to New York City on the anniversary of September 11. So September 11, 2002, I was in New York City, and I opened up the company's office in New York City as a vice president. I was 26, maybe 27 years old. I was leading teams of men who were in their 40s. But I was able to do all of that because I trained my mind. I stayed with that company for about a year, 18 months. Then I decided to quit, become a meditation teacher, because I couldn't get one thought out of my head. Everything I learned in college, and heck, my education at the University of Michigan was great. Look, it cost me a lot of money, but nothing was as valuable as that one class that taught me how to go within. But I couldn't get it out of my head. How was I the only person in that class? So I built a website. I got the license from Jose Silva's family, and I did my best to explode these methodologies on the internet. I got reasonably successful. I started using Google AdWords to drive people to the website, and then I started selling out my classes. Then I started selling out other trainers' classes. Then I started selling CDs. Now this was 2003, 2004. And eventually, as I kept tweaking the website, it became the company that today is known as Mindvalley.
But at one point you decided that you wanted to go all in on that, because I think you were making decent amount of cash, enough to have your place in Hell's Kitchen in New York City, and you could have just coasted at that point. And I've heard you say a quote that You're not interested in people that are looking to build a career. You want someone who's on a mission.
Exactly.
When did Vishen decide, I need to take this to 1 billion people? Like what clicked?
So I think there's a really important idea here that I think might be useful to your listeners. It is the idea of Kensho and Satori. It's a Zen concept. And it comes from, this idea is articulated by the spiritual teacher Michael Beckwith. He says that we will grow in life based on 2 different ways of growth. One is Satori, which is growth through insight. Insight is when you meditate. Insight is when you watch London Real. Insight is when you read a book. You gain an insight that helps you grow. Most people, however, don't bother with this. The vast masses of humanity don't care about insight. They are too busy running the hamster wheel. And when you don't have access to insight, you often grow through Kensho. Kensho is growth through pain. So no matter what you want to believe, what often happens is that you end up in hospital. It's frickin' painful. But you come out of there with new ideas on how to take care of your health. Or somebody breaks your heart. It is frickin' painful. But you discover how you truly want to be in a relationship. Or a business fails and it's painful. But you learn how to be a better entrepreneur. Now what happened to me was the forces of Kensho and Satori hit me at the same time. In my company that I worked for in New York, the values of the company were not aligned with my values. I became the victim of racism. I remember another guy in the company, a senior salesperson, he had done some stuff which was unethical, and I reported him to the boss. He came to me, I had my team around me, and he told my entire team, if you quit working for Vishen right now, I will pay you 20% more. I lost half my team that day. It was pure manipulation. When I confronted him, I remember his words. You're not a citizen of the United States. You talk to me again, and I will rip your fucking face off. I went to the boss and complained. The boss said, not going to do anything. He closes more deals than you do.
Sounds like Wall Street.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Sounds like
So
New York City.
At that point, I decided, so that was Kensho. That was the universe like punching me in the face. It was horrendous because I had to sit in that office. Half my team had moved to him. And okay, that's capitalism, right? He was paying more. But that guy mocked me every single day. Every single day. Now what happened was, he got found out for overpromising on the phone. He was fired. I stayed at my job. All those team members eventually came back because they knew that I was actually closing sales ethically. And I decided to, but I'd lost faith in the company's leadership and management. I applied the techniques I'd learned. I quadrupled my quota in November 2003. I went to my boss and I said, I quit. I won the Best Salesman Award that month, but I decided, but I wanted to do that for myself. I did not want to be a victim. So I won the Best Salesman Award, quadrupled my quota. I then quit and I said, listen, good luck to you guys. I need to start my own thing. But I didn't know what to start. And that's where Satori kicked in. And I'm sharing this so your viewers, as they reflect on their life, might be able to discern between Kensho. Sometimes a punch in the gut can be what you need to make a better decision in life. But you also got to listen to your heart and not just wait for those punches. I remember I was meditating, trying to figure out what should I start. And one rainy day in New York, walking through New York in the rain, and I love walking in the rain because it's almost meditative, right? The idea came to me. Why don't I start a meditation website? I've seen how powerful this is, but not enough people were doing it. What if I could help popularize it? So I took everything I learned in sales and marketing, selling legal software, and I applied it to selling meditation.
Isn't that fascinating? What did Steve Jobs say? Connect the dots in reverse.
Right.
Thing.
Steve Jobs said in his famous 2005 Stanford commencement address, you cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backwards.
I'm starting to see your dots connect. I didn't know about that you had, optimized that website in 03 and 04. I didn't know you had been in sales. And this all now makes much more sense as how you created Mind Valley. Look, the meditation practice is a powerful thing. I don't think I've ever told this story, but the reason
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.